I never wanted to use my magic again. After my pack exiled me for possessing a healing light they deemed too dangerous, I vowed to live quietly in this small forest cottage, alone and forgotten. But on my first night, as I reached beneath my bed for a fallen blanket, candlelight revealed something impossible. A werewolf pup barely breathing, its gray and white fur matted with blood. My hands trembled as I knelt on the cold wooden floor. The pup's amber eyes met mine, filled with pain and fading hope. I knew what using my magic would mean. If anyone discovered I had healed again, the consequences could be worse than exile. My former pack had made their judgment clear. My light magic was unpredictable, uncontrollable, a threat to everyone around me. But as the pup whimpered, something inside me cracked, and I could not let an innocent die to protect myself from fear. Golden light bloomed from my fingertips as I reached toward the trembling creature. The moment my magic touched its fragile body, warmth flooded the space between us. I poured everything I had into saving this life, knowing that this single act of compassion would change everything. Someone unexpected was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The cottage still smelled of strangers. Smoke from the hearth clung to the rafters, battling with the sharp tang of fresh-cut pine and damp earth still clinging to my boots. Wind sighed against the shutters like a restless spirit, testing the hooks, searching for a way in. It matched the way my thoughts scraped against the hollow places inside my chest. Exile. The word echoed in my mind as I moved through the single room, touching each rough-hewn surface as if claiming it might make it feel less like a cage. A narrow bed pressed against the far wall, a small table, 2 stools, shelves lined with herbs I had brought in a bundle tied to my back. My entire life reduced to what I could carry, and what the council had not bothered to burn. "You're safer alone," they had said. They meant we're safer without you. I set the candle stub on the bedside table, the tiny flame throwing long, uncertain shadows across the floorboards. My hands were still raw from scrubbing. The pack had left the cottage abandoned for years, and dust had gathered like reproach on every surface. Cleaning it had given me something to do, besides think of the moment my alpha had turned his back. Dangerous, they had called my magic. Unpredictable. I pressed my lips together and refused to remember the last patient I had healed. The way my light had flared brighter than ever before. The way fear had filled the room faster than gratitude. I had promised myself that night in the council hall that I would never call the light again. If they wanted me gone, then I would bury the gift that frightened them. I would live quietly, harmlessly, forgotten. The bed creaked when I sat, tired muscles protesting as I unlaced my boots. My fingers fumbled, clumsy with exhaustion. The candle threw a small pool of gold against the quilt, and for a moment I let myself imagine that this cottage could become a kind of peace. No accusing eyes, no whispers behind my back, just the trees, the wind, and me. I shifted, reaching for the wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed. It slipped from my grasp, tumbling to the floor and disappearing into the dark gap beneath the frame. "Of course," I muttered. With a sigh, I slid off the mattress, the floorboards cold against my knees. The candle's flame bent as I lifted it, stretching toward the emptiness under the bed. Shadows crowded close, thick as ink. I lowered my head and peered into the darkness. 2 dull amber sparks stared back. My breath snagged. For a heartbeat, I thought some fragment of my magic had escaped, pooling there like molten gold. Then the shape around the eyes resolved. A small muzzle, a black nose, dry and cracked, gray and white fur, clumped and darkened with blood and dirt. Tiny paws tucked under a trembling body. A pup, a werewolf pup, no more than a few moons old, crammed beneath my bed, as if the wooden frame could shield it from the entire world. The candle shook in my hand. Wax slushed down the side, burning my fingers before I remembered to move it back a little. The pup flinched at the shift of light, a frail whimper escaping its throat. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, ragged jerks, each breath a battle it was losing. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. No answer, of course, only another weak sound, so small it barely disturbed the heavy air. I should have been angry at whoever had left it here, at the pack that had cast me out, at the merciless forest that gave no shelter to the weak. Instead, what flooded me was colder and sharper than anger. Fear not of the pup, but of myself. If I touched it, the light would answer. It always did. When life dangled by a thread, it would uncoil inside me, golden and hungry, desperate to mend torn flesh and knit bone to drag the dying back from the yawning dark. And if anyone felt that flare, if even a whisper of what I had done reached my former pack, exile might be the kindest punishment they chose next time. I leaned back on my heels, forcing myself to breathe slowly. I could do nothing. Let nature take its course. Close my eyes and pretend I never saw those failing breaths. The pup's gaze followed me, glazed and unfocused, but still trying to hold on. It tried to tuck itself deeper into the shadows and failed, its legs too weak to obey. The scent reached me then. Blood, fear, and beneath it all, a trace of milk and warmth. A child's scent. I had held pups like this before. Smiled as they tumbled across clinic floors, watched mothers weep with relief after my light eased fevers and healed broken limbs. The council had praised me once, long before they decided my gift had grown too strong, too strange. "You will bring ruin down on us," my alpha had hissed that last night, the air thick with incense and accusation. "There will be no more of your experiments." The pup shuddered, a thin whine slipping out, and the memory shattered. Experiment. That was what they had called it when I reached deeper than any healer before me and pulled an elder back from the brink. When my light had exploded bright enough to blind those watching, they had not seen the miracle, only the risk. "Breathe," I whispered, not sure if I spoke to the pup or to myself. Its chest hitched, stilled, hitched again, weaker. My choice narrowed to a blade's edge. If I turned away now, no one would know. A lone healer in an abandoned cottage, living out her exile in silence. No one would come asking about a pup that died quietly in the night. I could wrap its little body in a blanket, bury it beneath the pines, and convince myself I had done all I could. But that was a lie, and I had told myself enough of those to last a lifetime. The truth pressed hot behind my eyes as I crawled closer, heedless of the dust grinding into my skirts. The pup tried to recoil and could not. Its eyes fluttered shut, then dragged open again with effort, as if some stubborn piece of its spirit refused to surrender. "I know," I whispered. "I know it hurts." My hand hovered in the air, inches from its matted fur. The light stirred, sensing need, tasting it. Heat curled in my chest like a waking creature, stretching, testing the bars of the cage I had built inside myself. "No," I breathed, but my protest was thin. I thought of the council's faces, pale and hard under torchlight. Of the way my alpha's voice had cracked, not with pity, but fear, when he pronounced my sentence. Of the pack turning away as I walked between them, carrying my satchel, and nothing else. Then I looked at the pup. Its breaths were no longer jerks. They were pauses with effort in between, each one slower than the last. The fragile line that tethered it to this world was fraying. I could walk away, or I could be the person I had always been before fear twisted my reflection. My fingers closed the last of the distance. The moment my skin brushed its fur, the light broke free. It surged up my arm in a rush of heat, burning and sweet like sunlight after endless winter. My vision blurred at the edges as the cottage fell away. There was only the pup and the dark knot of pain binding its little body. I pressed my palm more firmly against its side, leaning into the connection. "Stay with me," I murmured. "Please." Golden brightness flooded from my chest, down my arm, into the pup. I felt torn flesh knitting, ribs realigning, bruised lungs drawing in air more smoothly. Bones sang under my touch, vibrating with the echo of life returning. The effort ripped through me like a storm, tugging at every thread of strength I had left. Memories flickered in the light. Not mine, but the pup's. A larger shape snarling above it. Cold mud, running feet, a desperate scramble into the nearest shelter. My cottage, driven by instincts that didn't yet understand words like alpha or enemy. Only pain and the need to hide. Safe, I whispered, though my voice shook. You're safe. The world narrowed further, edges dimming. My heart hammered once, twice, then slowed as the light demanded more. I gave it freely, pouring grief, anger, and all the love I had tried so hard to bury into that tiny, trembling frame. Tears slid down my cheeks, falling onto the floorboards in silent drops. Just a little more, I begged. Then, beneath my hand, something changed. The frantic flutter of the pup's heartbeat steadied. Its breathing deepened. Each inhale smoother, less fragile. Warmth spread under my palm, pushing back the chill that had clung to its skin. The tight knot of pain loosened, dissolving into warmth and exhausted relief. The light, satisfied, began to recede, curling back into the hollow behind my ribs. I let it go with a shuddering exhale, every muscle trembling. The cottage came back into focus. The low ceiling, the crackle of the fire, the guttering candle now just a stub of wax. I sagged onto my side, breath sawing in and out of my chest. The world tilted, then steadied. For a moment, all I could do was lie there on the floorboards, listening. The pup was breathing. Not the ragged gasps from before, but slow, even breaths. I pushed myself up on shaking elbows and drew it gently out from under the bed. It was lighter than it had any right to be. Fresh pink scars traced its flank, where open wounds had been moments before. Its eyes were closed now, lashes resting peacefully against its fur. It made a soft sound as I cradled it against my chest. Not a whimper, but a sigh. Trust given without question. My own heart clenched. "Your trouble already?" I murmured, sinking back until my shoulders pressed against the side of the bed. "You know that, you little one?" It didn't answer, of course. It only nestled closer, nose burrowing into the crook of my arm as if I had always been home. Exhaustion rolled over me in heavy waves. My limbs felt made of wet sand. The healing had taken more than I had to give, scraping my reserves down to nothing. I should have lifted us both onto the mattress. Should have thought of what would happen when dawn came, and someone, anyone, realized I had broken my vow. Instead, I stayed where I was, sitting on the floor with my back to the bed and the pup sleeping against my heart. The candle died with a faint hiss, plunging the cottage into darkness, lit only by the last red glow of the hearth. My eyelids drifted shut as sleep dragged me under. One thought circled in the quiet, relentless as the wind outside. I had saved a life, and the world would not let that go unanswered. By the second morning, the cottage almost felt like it belonged to us. The pup followed me from hearth to table on clumsy paws, nosing at my skirts, collapsing in sudden heaps of sleep wherever a patch of sunlight found the floorboards. When he dreamed, his tiny legs twitched as if he were still running through the forest. But now the sounds he made were soft, contented huffs instead of broken whimpers. I tried not to name him. Names made things real. Names were promises. And I had already broken too many of those with my pack, with myself, with the light coiled inside my chest. So I called him Little One and Trouble, and pretended that wasn't the same as claiming him. "Stay out of the herbs," I scolded gently as he sniffed at the woven baskets by the hearth. He looked back at me, his head tilting, ears too big for his round face. Then, with all the solemnity of a prince accepting a crown, he toppled onto his side and went to sleep on my bare feet. Warmth seeped through my bones. The ache left by exile eased in small, unexpected places. The way the cottage no longer echoed quite so much. The way my laughter startled me when he tried to attack a dust mote dancing in a shaft of light. I still woke in the night with my heart pounding, fingers curled as if holding a life that was slipping away. But each time I reached out and found soft fur and slow, steady breathing, I had saved him. The world had not ended. On the second afternoon, rain drummed against the roof, turning the path outside to slick brown ribbons. I stirred a pot of broth over the fire, glancing down every few moments to make sure the pup hadn't wandered too close to the flames. He lay on his back, paws splayed, snoring softly. This is temporary, I told myself, though no one else was listening. He'll heal. And then what? I could hardly send him back into the forest alone, nor could I march him to the nearest border and ask the patrol of whichever pack found us if they had misplaced a pup. The thought of other wolves made my stomach tighten. I ladled broth into a wooden bowl, the scent of herbs and bone filling the small room, and nearly dropped it when a sound split the steady rhythm of rain. A knock. Not the hesitant, rapid tapping of a traveler seeking shelter. Not the familiar code of any packmate I had once known, but 3 measured, resonant blows that made the doorframe shiver. The pup shot upright. Ears pricked, a low, uncertain sound rumbling in his chest. My pulse lurched hot and fast. No one should be here. I set the bowl down with care and wiped my hands on my apron, palms suddenly slick. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I had not heard, but those 3 knocks had not been a request. They had been a summons. The pup padded to my side, pressing his warm flank against my ankle. I drew a breath, then another, and crossed the room. The iron latch felt colder than it should beneath my fingers. "Who is it?" I called, proud that my voice only trembled a little. Silence for a heartbeat, then a reply, deep and clear, carrying easily through the wood. "Jasmine, daughter of Rowan, open the door." He spoke my name the way a judge might read it from a scroll, formally, stripped of affection. The pup whined softly. His small body pressed harder against my leg, as if trying to hide me with his own. I swallowed. Only one kind of wolf spoke with that authority. Only one would know my parentage without introduction or question. The Alpha King. My fingers tightened on the latch. I considered for a brief, wild moment pretending to be someone else. A wandering herbalist who had never heard of Jasmine, never heard of exile, never heard the word dangerous breathed in the same sentence as her own name. But lies would not hold against a king's gaze. I lifted the latch and pulled the door open. He filled the doorway like a storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in travel-worn leathers that did nothing to soften the sheer force of his presence. Dark hair, damp from the rain, clung to his temples, and droplets glittered on the wolf fur cloak fastened at his throat. His eyes, gray, sharp, assessing, swept over me once before dropping to the small shape half hidden behind my skirts. The air seemed to thin between one breath and the next. He looked younger than I had expected, closer to my age than to my father's. But there was nothing untested about him. Power coiled around him like a second cloak, invisible but unmistakable. I had felt lesser alphas before, their dominance pressing like a hand at the back of the neck. This was different. This was the weight of a crown carried for years. "Your Majesty," I managed, lowering my gaze out of instinct more than respect. Old habits still clung to my spine. "May I come in?" he asked. It was phrased as a question, but we both knew the answer did not matter. Still, something rebellious and wounded in me straightened. "This cottage is mine," I said quietly. "For now, at least." A pause. Then, to my surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched, as if some stray amusement had escaped before he could leash it. "Then, as your guest, I ask permission." Rain pattered more insistently on the roof. The pup nudged my leg again, sensing the tension, but not understanding its shape. I stepped back. Very well. Come in, Your Majesty. He crossed the threshold without hesitation. The room seemed smaller with him inside it. I closed the door, suddenly acutely aware of the clutter, the herbs hanging in bundles, the single bed, the extra blanket folded in the corner where the pup usually slept. Those gray eyes swept the space once, taking in everything, then settled on the pup. The small wolf stared back, tail tucked, but head lifted as if trying to decide whether to be brave or afraid. Trevor, because it must be him, there was no other, knelt without warning. The Alpha King, ruler of the Central Packs, dropped to one knee on my worn floorboards and extended his hand toward the pup, palm up. He did not reach to grab, did not command. He simply waited. The pup sniffed, inching forward, paws silent on the wood. After a moment, he pressed his nose against Trevor's fingers. Relief flashed across the king's face, quick and fierce, before his expression smoothed again. "He is alive," Trevor said, more to himself than to me. "Thank the moon." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "How did you know he was here?" His gaze lifted to mine, steady and unflinching. "Because something impossible tore across my territory 2 nights ago." My mouth went dry. "I felt it," he continued. "Every alpha did. A flare of healing magic strong enough to bend the wind. We would have sent scouts in any case. But then I caught this little one's scent tangled in it." His hand brushed lightly over the pup's healed side. "One of my missing?" I asked. "He is your nephew?" "He is my responsibility," Trevor answered. "My brother's son." A shadow crossed his features. There and gone again. "He disappeared during an attack on one of our outer patrols. We thought—" His jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter what we thought. You changed that." I stared at the pup, at the faint pink line where torn flesh had once gaped. My light, his nephew, a king's attention crashing like a wave into the quiet shore of my exile. "I didn't know," I said softly. "I found him here, hiding under my bed." "And you healed him?" Not a question. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Yes." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold or crumble. "My pack exiled me for that magic," I added, because he deserved the whole truth, and because some stubborn part of me refused to let others tell my story first. They called it dangerous, unpredictable. I swore I would never use it again. "Yet you did," Trevor said. "There was a dying child under my bed." My voice sharpened, shame burned away by the memory of those failing breaths. I could not pretend I hadn't seen him. Something in his expression shifted. A small easing at the corners of his eyes. "Good," he said simply. The single word stole the air from my lungs. "Good?" I repeated. "You broke your vow," he said. "To save a life. I would call that an improvement over the vows that let a child die to preserve pride." I had braced for anger, suspicion, a lecture on laws and boundaries. Instead, he offered approval. It left me more off balance than any threat would have. "You are not afraid?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Of what I did? Of what I am?" His gaze flicked once to the herbs, the neat stacks of folded cloth, the carefully tended fire. "I am cautious," he said. "Any power that can heal like that can likely harm just as deeply. But fear," he shook his head. "No. Fear is for those who see only what might go wrong, never what might be made right." The pup chose that moment to butt his head insistently against my calf, as if seconding the sentiment. Trevor's mouth softened. "You saved my nephew," he said. "Whatever your past, whatever your exile, that is a debt I cannot ignore." My throat tightened. "I did not do it for a debt, Your Majesty." "I know." His voice lowered, gentler. "Which is why it matters." He rose smoothly to his feet, gathering the pup into his arms with surprising ease. The small wolf relaxed against his chest, as if this were familiar. Of course it was, I realized. He had known this scent long before he knew mine. "I must take him home," Trevor said. "His parents are—" He hesitated, then settled on, "waiting." The word carried more weight than it should, but I was too busy trying to steady myself to examine it. "You will be careful?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He looked genuinely taken aback. "With him, always." "No," I said. "With you. Whoever hurt him may try again." For the first time, something like real warmth lit his eyes. "You worry for a king you've known for less than an hour?" "I worry for anyone who carries a child like that," I said quietly. His gaze held mine for a long heartbeat. Then he inclined his head, a gesture that felt dangerously close to respect. "I will be careful," he promised. He stepped toward the door. The pup nestled against him, tiny claws hooked in the leather of his tunic. Panic fluttered in my chest, sudden and sharp. The cottage felt as if someone were stripping it of light with every step he took. "Wait," I blurted. He paused, hand on the latch. "His side," I said, voice barely steady. "If the scar darkens, if he begins to limp or cough, send word." The healing was rushed. I gave all I could, but some injuries take longer to understand. Trevor considered me for a moment, then nodded once. "I will," he said. "And Jasmine—" "Yeah, thank you." The words were simple, but they landed with unexpected force. No council had said that when I dragged their elder back from the brink. No alpha had spoken it when I spent nights bent over fevered pups. Gratitude had become a foreign language in my old life. Now it was spoken by a king in my doorway. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant smoke. I wrapped my arms around myself as he stepped out onto the slick path. For a moment he stood there, rain needling his hair, the pup safe in his hold. Then he shifted, the faintest hint of a smile touching his mouth. "He seems fond of you," he said. "If he grows strong, I may bring him to visit." "If you wish." "I would like that," I whispered. He inclined his head once more and walked into the rain, disappearing between the trees with the easy stride of a wolf who knew every root and stone. I watched until the forest swallowed them both. When I closed the door, the cottage felt unbearably quiet. The empty space where the pup had slept beside the hearth yawned wider than the room itself. I crossed to it anyway, sinking to my knees and pressing my palm flat to the still, warm floorboards. "He is safe," I told the silence. "He is home." But as the rain softened to a drizzle and the fire settled into embers, another thought coiled beneath the reassurance. Quiet and relentless, the Alpha King had felt my magic. He had followed it, and whatever exile I thought I had chosen for myself, the world beyond these walls had just reminded me that it still knew my name. Days turned into a week, and the silence of the cottage became a weight. I found myself looking at the empty spot under the bed, half expecting to see amber eyes glowing in the dark. I tried to focus on my herbs, drying lavender and grinding mint, but my magic felt restless, like a tide wanting to go back to sea. Then, on the 8th night, the horses came. Not just one, but a small troop. Trevor returned, looking more haggard than before. He didn't wait for me to speak. "He won't eat," Trevor said, the command in his voice cracking. "He cries for you. My sister says the pup hasn't slept in 3 days. He is fading again." I didn't need to hear more. I grabbed my satchel, packed the few things I had, and let him lift me onto his horse. We rode through the night, the forest a blur of black and silver. When we reached the palace, a sprawling fortress of gray stone and golden light, I was rushed to the nursery. The moment I walked in, the pup's keening stopped. He scrambled toward me, burying his face in my skirts. I lifted him, my light flaring instinctively, and he sighed against my neck, finally asleep. It's a bond, Trevor whispered from the doorway, watching us. He's tethered to your magic. I looked at the king, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he looked at me not as a threat, but as a salvation. Then I suppose I'm not going back to my cottage, I said. He stepped forward, his hand resting on the doorframe. Only if you want to. But I would prefer you stay where you are needed, where you are wanted. For the next few months, I lived in the heart of the palace. I became the pup's shadow and, slowly, the king's confidant. We walked the battlements at night, you discussing the fear that had led to my exile and the hope that was rebuilding Trevor's pack. The counselors whispered, their eyes sharp and suspicious, but Trevor stood between me and their judgment like an unyielding shield. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, Trevor found me in the garden. "The council wants me to choose a Luna," he said, his voice level, but his eyes searching mine. My heart hammered against my ribs. "And have you?" I asked. He took a step closer, the scent of pine and rain following him. "I have. But she is a woman who thinks she is dangerous. A woman who saved my nephew and, I think, saved me from becoming the kind of king who rules through fear." He took my hand, his thumb tracing the scars on my palm. "Jasmine, stay. Not because of the pup. It's because of me." I looked at him, the king who had seen my light and didn't blink. I thought of the cottage, the lonely silence, and the fear I had lived in for so long. Then I looked at the light flickering between my fingers, no longer a curse, but a gift. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fire inside me. I was the light, and I was finally home. If you want to see how Jasmine and the Alpha King face the Council's final challenge and secure their future, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of this epic romance. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's shoes? Stay in the palace or return to the safety of the woods? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your fellow wolf lovers. See you in the next story.